It's important that you accept the responsibility of life and the responsibility you have to be a good steward of the land, whether you're in the city or you're out here actually working with it.
For thousands of years, the Big Hole Valley was common hunting and gathering ground for the Salish, Shoshone, Bannock, Nez Perce, Blackfeet, Apsalaga, Cheyenne, and other indigenous peoples who interacted with and stewarded these lands. Then from the late 1800s through to present day, cattle grazing has been prominent in the valley. The connected landscapes that still exist here allow for an abundance of wildlife and desirable recreational opportunities. This is a look into how residents are working together to ensure a continued coexistence of people and place in the valley.
On the Big Hole River. It's unique in the fact that it's a freestone river, so there's no dam, very little development, very rural, small towns. The fishery itself is spectacular, and it's a very special place.
We still have the rich valley bottoms and the riparian areas and then the sage steppe, and it's all connected from the valley bottom to the forest.
Tight-knit communities based around those two major industries of agriculture and recreation.
The people here mostly are old families that have been here a long time, generations deep. It's a big family, more or less. And like a family, people fight and get along. And when all the cards are down, everybody jumps in to help. It's a wonderful place.
This river and the floodplain that we're in is really what keeps this area thriving for people that want to visit and for people that make a living off the landscape here.
Our family's been here since about the 1870s. This is home. We're part of this area. And pre-Columbian, there were 10 times the amount of Indians there were here when Lewis and Clark went through. They used the land. The landscape was important to them. It's important to us. I have two bosses. One is Mother Nature in this earth, and the other is society. I don't own this ground. I'm a tenant. I lease it from society because they've allowed us to do this. In general, right now, the American people just want to come out here and recreate, and I don't blame them. But they have to understand how important the management of the resource is. We need a working landscape. As you drive through the West, you look around, there's a rancher, a public land rancher, taking care of that resource for you. It has to be done ecologically sound, and you can do it that way.
You watch your private land as close as you do the forest land. We try to watch the riparian areas, and if you don't concentrate large amounts of cattle in one pasture, that's hard on a pasture. We are truly stewards of the land.
For millennia, the grazing and movement of bison on the landscape here was essential to the health of the grassland ecosystem. When bison were killed off to near extinction by the early 20th century, this critical component to the landscape's nutrient cycle was eliminated. When managed properly, cattle can provide some of the disturbance necessary for the health of the ecosystem.
Ecological systems don't need pristine and manicured. It's dynamic and it's disturbance-based. Cattle provide that, and with good ranching, you have good stewardship of the resource. Those are the types of things we need to incentivize and encourage.
We're part of this resource. We have an obligation and a responsibility to manage the resource. And the most important things are the little things that you don't see, because they're the ones that determine the health of the river, the health of the ecosystem. You have to have cattle involved to trump the litter and the manure and stuff to feed those microorganisms.
Along the section of the Big Hole River where Jim's ranch operates, his family manages the floodplain to promote a healthy riparian ecosystem. This results in improved soil and vegetation health, wildlife habitat, prime wintering grounds for their cattle, and reduced erosion, which benefits fish habitat. The use of electric fencing keeps cattle clear from the river bottom.
There's really nothing better than going out in the spring. The river's high and it's as full as it's going to be all year. Just having that moment of just the first couple oar strokes, watching the first couple casts, it's pretty phenomenal. In this rural area, there's really two forms of economy, and there's the agriculture and the tourism. And the tourism's really based in fly fishing around here. I own a fly shop in Melrose, Montana, the Sunrise Fly Shop. We started 16 years ago. It's a small little destination shop. We have several hundred people a year come fish with us. These people travel from all over the world to come have an experience on this river that's unlike anything else. They feel like they've come back to nature, and they spend money in fly shops. And then they're also spending money at hotels and restaurants and all these different places. So all this money coming in, a lot of it has to do with the resource that we have here and the fishing. So it's upon us to be stewards of this great resource and take care of it. Not just when we're out there, but when we have opportunities to be a part of organizations like the Big Hole Watershed Committee. We already have a changing environment. And if we don't take steps as a group, as anglers, as fishermen, to step up and be a part of that, we're missing an opportunity to protect this resource.
In 1995, the Big Hole Watershed Committee formed in response to low flows and growing pressures on the river. The committee brought together individuals who were not historically known for working together: ranchers, anglers, government agencies, and conservation groups.
Where it all started was some really bad water years in the early 90s. And at that time, there was a lot of finger pointing and polarization between irrigators and recreationists and other community members. And the governor's task force called a meeting in Divide and got the stakeholders to sit down and start talking about what can we do about low flows in the Big Hole.
Slowly we added more to the committee to make other entities there so they could understand us and we could understand where they were coming from.
If the river gets determined to be a chronically dewatered system, that would have triggered regulatory agencies to take a more heavy-handed approach at how water is managed on this landscape. So the alternative is, let's create this space where we can, as best as possible, understand our resources. You need different experts, and you need them to come together and share their knowledge base so that we can start to come up with a realistic picture of what's happening. It's that persistent space that we've created that has, I think, impacted the culture of how we deal with natural resources here in the Big Hole. It's really different than other places.
The Big Hole Watershed Committee continues to create that common space today, meeting monthly to work through challenges in the watershed. They also secure funding and lead restoration projects that benefit the health of the land and local communities. They have generated over $8 million in contracted funds that have gone into projects and studies on the ground.
We manage anything that has to do with the watershed. And that starts from the top of the mountain to where the river goes into another river.
We have done a lot of things. There's been a lot of places where they were using irrigation water going a couple, 3 miles to water cattle. We put some wells there with the solar power there for them, and many things like that to keep every bit of water.
Other work by the committee includes stream restoration to prevent erosion and projects that restore the natural meander of previously straightened channels. This slows the flows, allowing water to saturate deeper into the soil and create return flows to the river in drier seasons.
We try not to be heavy-handed about our approach, and we try to create projects that really just kickstart the right natural processes. We want Mother Nature and natural systems to be able to thrive on their own. That's really where resilience comes from. Mostly our work is face-to-face with people on the landscape, bringing those different expertises together to generate directions for solutions. It means a lot of phone calls, a lot of grant writing, and a lot of trying to bring more and more people into the fold and into this spirit of conservation.
It takes about 3 years to get a good collaborative going, so you know the personalities and you trust each other. To get started, it's probably really important to have a good facilitator. To let the people work through their personalities and get through all their prejudices.
We don't vote. We talk things out until we can come to a consensus.
When you pass a resolution, everyone has to agree to it. If you say no, that means that doesn't go through. But you have to explain why you're saying no. And so through that process, either you convince the group you're right, or possibly the group can convince you that you're wrong. If you run into an issue that you can't solve, you drop it because you don't want to destroy your group. And every once in a while, it's happened to me, it's happened to everyone in our group, you stand up and make an ass out of yourself on an issue, and the rest of us just sit back and say, I wonder when my time's gonna come. And you're always looking for better ways to do things. That's what outside experience helps. We all got blinders on.
I've been involved with the Watershed Committee for about 3 years now. It became obvious that I needed to have more of an active role. We need to be able to share our knowledge of being on this water every day, because there's a lot of times that we notice things that somebody that's on the river once a month may not notice.
The most important people in this whole thing are the guides, because they can either say to the fishermen, the dam ranchers are drying this river up, or they can say to the fishermen, this is an unbelievably dry year. We're all working together, and the ranchers are contributing water. We're slowing down our fishing. This is a working system. There's some good groups that are working on this. It's important that you donate to, so we can do what we're doing.
There's only so many resources and so many dollars in this valley. It's important for us to try to gain buy-in from the clients that come fishing with us, and organizations that are out there that have dollars that are given for grants for restoration work. One of the great things about this is we're all from different backgrounds. And no, we don't always see eye to eye, and we definitely have different priorities. But we all are here to protect the Big Hole River. Having that common voice and having common ground is what's going to gain successes.
I think it's an education thing, so each entity can understand each other, that we're all in this together.
Because we're really known to represent a broad base of stakeholders, when we decide to voice an opinion about a particular issue, it does carry a lot of weight. You just can't create a group like this overnight and have it have the influence that it does. You know, it really takes persistence and this sort of longevity and track record that I think the Watershed Committee has developed. Another critical aspect of the Big Hole is that the town of Butte gets 40% of its drinking water from this river. They pipe it up and over the Continental Divide.
Due to impacts on water quality and quantity from intensive mining, the city of Butte supplements its water supply with distant sources.
The manager of the Butte water supply system sits on our board because how they manage water there impacts how much they need to draw from the Big Hole. Our best case scenario actually might be improving the Butte water storage system so that they depend less on the Big Hole River. And if you don't really bother to look into it, you'd never realize how complex this stuff really is.
In the summer of 2021, there were record droughts across the West. Additionally, wildfires in the Big Hole Valley burned from July all the way until November, blanketing the valley in smoke and burning over 80,000 acres of forest.
I've never seen the drought be quite this bad. A drought like this makes a lot of expenses on the ranchers. Hay was very, very short. We're gonna have to buy lots of hay. Everybody is. And the river is the lowest I've ever seen. It's hard on the fish. And with the fire and all, the smoke is hard on the animals and the people and the crops and everything. And it's been really tough this year.
The grass you grow this spring is the grass you use next March when you put those cows out on the range. You're not going to get the grass to grow when it's this hot. That's a huge cost. And there's a lot of little operators around here that are probably carrying a lot of debt. Some of them have had to sell their cattle because you just didn't get the growth this year. And be quite frank, I don't know if they're going to make it. It's very serious. And it could have an impact of who's going to own these ranches down the road. This is the most valuable asset we have, and we have to learn to manage it.
We had an incredibly low snowpack. We had the driest spring and summer that we've seen in years. And what that's done is brought the river down to a level where we haven't seen it in a long, long time. All but 25 miles of the river is currently closed to fishing because it's too low. The water temperature was getting so high that it was becoming lethal to the fish. It's been so challenging. I know the ranchers have had a difficult year irrigating. The bookings that we have at the shop are down anywhere from 50 to 75%. It's been difficult, and it's all because we don't have water. And without water, we don't have an economic backbone in this valley.
In 1988, we had a very similar precipitation year. Historically low flows, historically fast runoff, and the Big Hole River at Wisdom went dry for 32 days. This year, same climate, same precip patterns, the river hasn't gone dry. You know, it's not great, but we haven't lost the river. And the difference has been the spirit of cooperation. So we've seen an unprecedented amount of giving back water for irrigation. We've seen our guides and outfitters put on voluntary restrictions on their own business for the sake of the fishery. What I think is really encouraging, and to me is a testament to the Big Hole Watershed Committee and the importance of the organization, is that folks really are making these changes to their operation with the resource in mind. They're not making changes to sort of maximize short-term profit at the expense of the resource over the long term. It's actually quite the opposite. One of the first real accomplishments of the Watershed Committee was our voluntary drought management plan. It was the first of its kind in the state. The plan required us to install stream gauges to be able to separate out different sections of the river so that if the river hits a certain flow trigger or a temperature trigger, if it's temperature related, we want to protect the fishery, so a section of the river would close. The drought management plan also establishes a call down list, basically, where when the flows hit a certain trigger, ranchers start calling each other and they start conserving. Voluntary conservation is one of the best tools that we have to make sure that we don't lose our rivers in really tough years. There's definitely changes that are happening with runoff and the amount of snowmelt. Everyone is adapting to those changes. We're looking for how to build more resilience in the natural systems. I look a lot towards the history of beaver in the West. There used to be way more beaver, 10 times more beaver than there are currently. And those beaver, that's one of the things that they did. They held back snowpack. They created these holding ponds for themselves, which also created an abundance of wildlife, habitat, diversity, all these things. We have some projects with the Forest Service looking in high alpine meadows to create projects while they're thinning to put mimicked beaver structures in these streams and get those floodplains saturated again. These natural systems can do a lot of this work for us. We just got to kind of kickstart the right projects in the right places.
We have this amazing river, and we're seeing how the climate's change is having a direct impact on this resource. And we don't have the cold springs and the wet springs that we used to have. The reason temperature in the river is such a big deal is the river is filled with trout and mountain whitefish and grayling. And these are cold water species. The temperature can get hot enough that they will just die because the water is too hot.
The Big Hole River is home to the last fluvial stronghold of native Arctic grayling in the United States, outside of Alaska.
Trying to do better for the Arctic grayling, that was another big push of ours early on. We didn't want that fish to be listed under the Endangered Species Act. As soon as that happens, then any irrigation withdrawals by an irrigator can be considered a take against the livelihood of the fish. So all of a sudden, you've got the fear of litigation if you're a rancher for just trying to make a living. So then the answer becomes, how can we prevent this fish from getting listed? What do they need? And that's where the Partners Program with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service came in, and the Big Hole Watershed Committee was key in that partnership in bringing funding for specific projects.
And the Big Hole Arctic grayling habitat is 90% private land. If we don't work with private landowners, we really are handcuffed about how effective we can be for conservation. We have 33 landowners in the Big Hole that have these site-specific conservation plans for Arctic grayling. It's been phenomenal. The habitat has improved, the stream flows have improved, and the population has responded. And while we're doing that, we're conserving not only grayling, but the whole watershed. Aquatic, birds, mammals, all the species that utilize that habitat.
After lots of hard work in 2020, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service determined that that fish did not need to be listed in the Endangered Species Act. They really cited the voluntary conservation that's going on in the upper river as one of the things that's putting the fish on the right trajectory. I mean, that's just a testament to collaborative conservation.
The Partners for Fish and Wildlife program provides technical and financial assistance to landowners looking to restore and enhance habitat on their land. In the Big Hole Valley, this program includes the installation of solar wells, wildlife-friendly fences, and projects that improve soil health and drought resilience.
Our program's philosophy is to put someone in the community. Landowners with good cause, they are suspicious of government a lot of times. And so when you put someone in the community and you show them that you care about their livelihoods, I think that's what you need to do for success. For me, I've learned so much about what their needs are, what their water needs are, what their grazing needs are. At the same time, I think that we've been able to educate landowners what the needs of the fish and the wildlife are. If it's not gonna work for the landowner, it's not gonna work for the fish. If we're gonna put the rancher out of business, it's just not gonna work. And so we've come up with these funding sources and these strategies that hopefully are win-wins for not only keeping ranching on the landscape, but helping them out a little bit. If we put in a stock water system for a rancher, they might not have to chop ice in the winter. What we get back from it is maybe they're not diverting water out of the river, or maybe those cows aren't hanging out right in the riparian area because their water is elsewhere.
We also saw concern from producers with the conflict between livestock and predators. And we've been running with Chet a range rider program, and he is one of a kind as far as range riders.
The common approach of a range rider is to ride with the cattle to prevent conflict with predators. Chet's approach is unique in that he tracks the habits of the predators, primarily wolves.
My job is to keep track of cattle, to keep track of predators, not just wolves, but bears and mountain lions. I watch the dirt, and I'm going along looking through this stuff real quick as I'm traveling. I scan very fast with my eyes. I'm looking here at all the details, all the stick that's out of place. Why is that tree laying in the road? Why is the rock flipped over? You have to be like the old days when we didn't have phones and things to distract us. We had to rely on noticing what was going on around us. And I time my wolves as best as I can. I use game cameras. I try to figure out when they're going to be someplace. They generally hold a somewhat schedule. I tend to call the ranchers and say, this is their schedule. They'll be there tomorrow. That way the ranchers can expect it. They can go out and they can ride their cattle on those days. They can move their cattle. If they come through, there's hardly ever any trouble. What the rancher is up against is what anybody would be up against if somebody was coming by and jerking money out of your bank account all the time. That's what they're up against. They tend to run very fine lines on making money on what they're doing. Anything that they can do to make that easier is a good thing for the rancher, and that's what I try to do. I'm a tool. I alone am not going to change what happens with the wolves. People tend to be so extreme anymore. And on the wolf issue, the wildlife is penned up in these little blocks of habitat between cities, between interstates. It's not like it was 200 years ago. The people that want the wolves on the landscape, they have to accept that there's some wolves going to die. And the ranchers have to accept that sometimes they're going to pay the price for having them wolves there, whether they want them or not. They're here. They're going to have to research and find ways to deal with them, like in the Big Hole with the Watershed Committee and the ranchers here. It's a balance thing.
Take all of this fertile valley bottom and take ranching off of it. What other land use is there that has value so to speak, in the money-driven world that we live in. It's subdivision, it's big mansions, it's trophy homes for the very, very wealthy. And it's folks that aren't stewarding the ground. They're not there every day, not really caring about the biodiversity of the insects or the bugs that are under the rocks, right? It really devolves really quickly into everyone for themselves. You lose the collective really quickly.
There used to be a lot more ranches and open space, and now there's a lot of subdividing. A lot of the people are summer people only, so you really don't get to know them very well. I taught at the rural school because I was a school teacher. We had 50 students at one time, and now we're lucky to have 8 to 10 students here.
Absentee owners come in, and they usually don't employ much more than 1 or 2 people to take care of that place. In the Big Hole, you have a population that's dropping. It's a loss of community. I think that's what it boils down to. It's just a loss of community. However, what do? You know, you have a rancher that goes to the bank every 3 years to borrow money to get through the next year. A guy comes to a rancher and this guy offers him more money than he will make, his children will make, his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren will make in their lifetimes on that piece of ground, and they offer him that money. That's hard to turn down. When you're getting up, going out in a blizzard to feed your cattle every day, you can't blame them. It's the way things are going.
You know, there's only so much land. If you don't keep some of these ranches, the land will be gone, and I don't know how we'll feed the people.
The one thing about the range livestock is that they convert forage into protein and fiber for the American people. And they're being used as a tool to cause the disturbance that's necessary to keep the range resource healthy. If these folks that do a good job on the land can't make it, you're going to have to figure out some way to keep them there. If society doesn't recognize that, economically, it's been very, very difficult to continue because you've got good people out here that are willing to work, but it's about ready to break us. They think we're big, rich people that lock everything up, but that's going to be the case if they keep doing what they're doing, because we're not going to be here. It's going to be owned by rich families.
If we take ranchers off the land and we're now dealing with roads and concrete and houses, it just fragments habitat. This whole landscape is connected from the valley bottom to the mountain peaks. And when you fragment one type of habitat, it's going to have impacts on the next type of habitat. So having this landscape watershed scale conservation effort, keeping open spaces, keeping these big ranches intact, that is such a key for all these wildlife species.
One of the great things about the Big Hole is we still have a lot of large connected landscapes. Not because we've let it go, it's because the landowners that own these parts are making decisions to make sure that there's a place for the moose that we just saw, and a place for the fish, and a place for the people. You can't keep a landscape connected if the people aren't connected.
What the people in modern society have lost is understanding how patient you have to be with Mother Nature. She's unbelievable, and she can heal about everything. But you gotta be patient, and you gotta help her out.
Everything is so connected and important. The soil, the plants, the pollinators, the bugs. When you have intact systems, it's Mother Nature's best.
We have to wake up. We have to understand that this is a working landscape. We should all get together to work, and that's where collaboratives come in.
The Big Hole Committee, they have a mission to take care of this valley and to see this valley improve, and they've got a lot of good minds doing that. Diversity, of course, in anything, diversity is a step up. If the rest of the country would try as hard as they do to cooperate and try to move forward with things, it'd be a lot better.
I think that everybody needs to be active in their community, and then we have no reason to complain. These things are important.
This is the river that runs through the Big Hole Valley, and all of these communities that are up and down the river, this is the lifeblood of those communities. The anglers, the outfitters, the landowners, the irrigators, everybody needs to be concerned, and everybody needs to step up and work together, because individually we have nothing. We need to work together to make this a better place.